I sent you all an email about my planned sabbatical for this summer. And I got a lot of very nice notes back from people thanking me for all the work that I do and wishing me a relaxing and rejuvenating time. So I appreciate that a lot. One of the emails I got was from Emily Betts, who's a member of our congregation, someone who's been on our vestry, was on our strategic planning team back in 2017, 2018. And over the last couple of years, Emily and I have been occasionally in communication with one another about our ideas about having church services outside. Not necessarily out in the courtyard of the church like we had beginning in the fall of 2020, once a month or so until such time as the pandemic situation had ameliorated a little bit and we could come in here again. But gathering, out in a park or on a farm or by the river to pray. And we both took part in some webinars being offered by a growing network of people, not just in the Episcopal Church, but across many denominations who are either engaged in this practice or interested in organizing something like it. And anyway, I kept, saying to Emily, I'd be really interested in doing this if you want to work together on it, and, that kind of thing. Anyway, my email from her this week, after she wished me a relaxing and rejuvenating summer, told me something I actually already knew, which was that she has been holding now for some time gatherings of what she's calling Wild Church Petaluma, once a month, and that it's going very well and seems to be meeting a need in our community, a need that people have who are longing for community and for spirit, but who would not be comfortable doing so, gathering in a place like this, a place so infused with the atmosphere of traditional organized religion. And I had a kind of an interesting reaction to this email. I felt a little hurt that she'd gone ahead and did this without telling me. Not that she really needed my approval. I'd never indicated to her that I expected that. But nonetheless, so there was that. And then there was a certain kind of fear that I felt. A fear of losing market share to this gathering of, people happening once a month who were getting their spiritual needs met elsewhere. So I had to look at that and kind of work through those reactions. And then I read the scriptures for this week. And I thought about Paul getting driven by the Spirit out of Asia Minor, across the sea to Greece, having a dream of a man in Macedonia saying, "We need you, Paul, come help us." And when he gets to Macedonia, finally, he encounters not a man, but a group of women gathering outside the gates of the city of Philippi by the river, where there's a place of worship. And there he meets Lydia, a dealer in fine purple cloth, a dealer in luxury goods, a woman clearly of some substance. Because when she receives in her heart what it is that Paul has to say about the resurrection of Jesus, she is baptized as the first Christian convert in Europe. And not only herself, but the household of which she, interestingly, is the head. I thought about Jesus telling his disciples, "Do not let your hearts be troubled, and do not be afraid. When I told you I was going to the Father, you ought to have rejoiced, because the Father is greater than I. And the peace that I leave with you, my peace, is not a gift like the gifts of this world, where when someone else gets a gift, it means there's less available for you." And then I thought about that vision in Revelation, where the angel carries John, the seer of Patmos, up to the top of a very high mountain. And I compared it with that passage in the Gospels where Satan is tempting Jesus in the wilderness and carries him up to a very high mountain. And Jesus can see laid out before him all the kingdoms of the earth. And he says, "If you will but worship me, they will all be yours." But this vision is very different. It's a vision of all the kingdoms of the earth indeed. But rather than them being brought to heel and made subject to one royal sovereign, they all bring their glory, the glory of all the nations of the earth, into that heavenly city where it is the Lamb who sits upon the throne, the crucified one. And somehow all the glory of all those kingdoms is simply added to the glory that is present there in the heavenly city that has come down to earth. And the glory of one kingdom does not diminish the glory of another. As the African-American theologian Willie James Jennings writes in his commentary on the book of Acts, "In the Spirit, nothing is ever lost. More is always added." We live in a time of tremendous cultural change. And we don't really know where it's all going. We don't know what the culture of the future will bring, what it will be like. But a couple of things are increasingly clear. that are of great importance for us as Christians, that speak to the way that we think about and carry out the mission of the gospel in this time. And one is that whatever the culture that is coming into being is, it must be one that has laid aside, or I should say added to, the mechanistic view of the universe, that no longer thinks dualistically of the human soul as the only place in the universe where God is found. But it is a holistic understanding. The understanding that God dwells in all things. And yes, above all things, but only as all things are drawn into unity in God. The people of our town and of the world are seeking a new communion with the natural world, and not a moment too soon, because our way of approaching it as something dead, as a mechanistic and lifeless substance to be exploited for our advantage, has brought us perilously close to disaster. Only a renewed sense of the sacredness of all things and of God present in the world around us can save us. And the other thing that is of vital importance for us to understand about the culture that is coming to birth is that it is a global culture. And this is nowhere more evident than in the church, which for the last several centuries has been largely defined by a European colonial project, largely based consciously or unconsciously on the application of the universal standard of whiteness. And we see in the United States of America at this time many people who are living in fear of the fact that we can no longer think of whiteness as the superior and defining cultural reality. That heavenly city come down to earth brings into itself the glory of all the nations. That the church of the Holy Spirit is breaking out of the cultural container of whiteness. And this is something of which we need not be afraid. Peace I leave you. Peace I give to you. My own peace, says Jesus. We live in between the memory of Jesus, the Nazarene carpenter, A human being defined by his culture, his religion, his time period. And that universal spirit that he said that he would send to us in his name, which continually guides us into the future, continually breaks open those words of Jesus for our time, for our understanding, to transcend any single cultural manifestation or national identity or even church institution, but is continually emptying itself of itself so that more can be added to it. We have a responsibility to speak these words of hope and confidence at a time when so many are trafficking in fear and hatred of the other, when so many are exploiting the insecurities of young people in particular, and trying to inscribe in them narrow and fearful ideas of God's gift. A gift that can be taken away from them and given to others, like the gifts of this world.